University, Jackson State, okay, that's cool. Jackson State University, and that's Texas Southern. Uh, it's a challenging effort to try to change that status, and we're finding day by day that the challenges are to some degree from within. I won't go into them unless Professor Cunningham wants me to do that, but it's very challenging to change that status. It's not coincidental that only 5 of the over 100 have degree granting accredited jazz studies program. That's not accidental. That's not coincidental. It is a long opportunity, a long held. People are unwilling, or I guess they feel unchanged.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Kamaldeen. So we look forward to hearing more about the HBCU Jazz Initiative, and thank you for being with us today. So I think that what we'll do is we're going to just hear a brief word. We have a few offices. We have founding members, and then we have an honorary chair who is the prolific Steve Coleman, and then we have the legendary jazz master Charles Tolliver, who has agreed so graciously to be our honorary our advisory council chair. And so we just want to hear from them. Just a greeting, Mr. Tolliver. Perhaps you could go first. If you have any encouraging words for us, we're going to review our mission, but if you have any encouraging words for us in terms of guidance and thoughts about our mission, we appreciate hearing from you.
Yes. Two
Actually,
words.
let's give a hand for the legendary Charles Tolliver.
2 words. Uhuru. I'm pleased to join this illustrious group, and I'm better at answering questions than I am giving an overall take on everything. So I'm a repository of some 6 decades of being involved as an activist musician in our art form, and I'm at your disposal.
We can't tell you how much we appreciate that, Professor Tolliver, and thank you. Do you mind explaining to us, what does Uhuru mean? What's your interpretation concerning the music?
Uhuru. Well, for lack of a better expression, there's been a lot of give and take about the use of the word jazz. And when I broke in with Max Roach, that word was never used. And a lot of what I am in terms of being an activist stemmed off of my relationship with him. And actually, we never spoke in terms of Uhuru. It was just implied. It was always there that the African American musician who had involved his life and vocation with quote unquote jazz, modern jazz music, had to make a move other than what our earlier progenitors, had done. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And we'll circle back to you when we read through our charter and hear some insights. And then we do want to welcome our honorary chair, Steve Coleman, who's been so gracious enough to join us he's on tour in Europe. He's made time for us. And so, Steve, we just want to hear a few words from you, any thoughts, and let's give a hand for the prolific Steve Coleman.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, it's later here. It's darker, and this hotel room is dark. But I'm in Amsterdam. Um, so I ran back. Got online to try to catch the meeting and everything. I'm assuming that everybody else is in the States. I'm not sure.
Yes.
Okay. Um, I don't know what you guys were talking about. I just came in just before Charles was speaking, and so I'm not sure what was going on, but I wholeheartedly concur. The term, and I've told you this many times, Maya. The term jazz is problematic for me. You know, personally, I don't use it myself, but I just think of the music in terms of culture and in terms of which cultures produced which musics or whatever. I just think of it sort of like that. You have music that comes from China, you have music that comes from Indonesia, you have music that comes from Afro Brazilians, Afro Cubans, African Americans. A lot of different things. So I prefer to look at it more like that. And the African American lineage is a pretty long lineage. It goes back. I guess recorded wise, it goes back about 10 years or something like this, Charles, or something like this. I don't know. The first recording I have is 1913 by James Reese Europe. And that's the first like actual recording I have of people playing. Maybe there was some stuff before that. Somebody told me that they had something from 1907. I don't know if that's true or not. But that's about when the first recorded stuff happening on a consistent basis. I guess it started happening in the 20s. I have recordings of King Oliver, King Freddie Kepper, people like that, which is the generation before Louis Armstrong. So I have a lot of recordings from that period. Before that, it gets kind of sparse and the recordings get very scratchy. I don't know whether they're recording cylinders or what, but obviously the music was happening before recordings were happening because it was already in process by the time that they started recording. And I don't know if it had a name then. I read once that Duke Ellington called up Fletcher Henderson and said that we need to nix this jazz word in the bud before it gets started because it's problematic. And he said that Fletcher wasn't really that concerned with it. But so that I know that earlier on they were not too into the word, but the music itself, which I guess Duke called Negro music at the time. That was the term that was common at that time. He just looked at it as the music of our people, and that's sort of how I look at it. I don't think any differently. I've talked to Max, I've talked to a bunch of different cats, Rollins and everybody, and they all see it, more or less like that. And I don't know, like I said, I don't know exactly what you guys were talking about, but I'm just riffing off of what Charles was saying just now. And is there any question or something you want to ask me in specific? Any question?
Question for Mr. Coleman. I think what you said, you touched on the fact we're looking at the music as culture. And so I think that kind of sums up what our SIG is about and what our mission is about. So just to be polite, and I think that what we'll do is to kind of go into the program, is to save a little time and respect everyone's time. Folks on Zoom, if you don't mind just quickly introducing yourselves, Dr. Travis and then Brother Conclave, very quickly.
Yeah, I'm Travis Jackson, University of Chicago. I've been here, almost 20 years. It'll be 20 years next year. And like the other people, I study a broad range of music, but when it comes to the specific focus of this group, one of my main interests, especially these days, is thinking in terms of something that Andrew Hill said in an interview a long time ago. He talks about this period before the music got separated. And so a lot of what I'm interested in is keeping this music, keeping discussions of this music in contact with discussions of what's happening in the Caribbean, what's happening in West and Central Africa, what's happening in all these different parts of the world, because there's a sense in which, we can be talking about gospel, we can be talking about rhythm and blues, but there are a lot of things that all of these styles of music have in common, and they keep feeding each other over time. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Dr. Travis. And Brother Conklin, that kind of speaks to what Dr. Travis just said. If you can share with us who you are, what you do, where you are right now.
Oh, Sanbonan, hey everyone. I'm Ntlanhla Mahlangu, and I come from South Africa. I'm a junior jazz alto saxophone student at Manhattan School of Music. I'm also a composer and arranger and a producer and an entrepreneur. So yeah, so that's me. And some of the work that I do apart from schoolwork is trying to draw a solid line from the indigenous, contributions of like African indigenous cultures and modern artistic music or modern modes of expression, like fashion, like the way we speak, like the way we walk, and the way these different languages sing, and try to get that and kind of acknowledge the contributions of my people into all of these different spheres of our modern culture. So basically that's what I do.
Thank you, Conklin. And there's more to say about this brother who I met in South Africa doing my field research. But anyway, he's a prolific alto saxophonist, up and coming jazz star. So, okay, I do want to acknowledge our founding members. Dr. Stephanie Shonkin is here, Leslie Haynes is here, Dr. Cheryl Keys is here, and I'm missing any of the founding members. Thank you so much for your support, and we do look forward to hearing from you. So I think we'll just jump right in. I'm going to share my screen, and Mr. Tolliver, Steve, if you have to leave, it's, we understand. So thank you for saying those words, but just, feel free to stay. Now let's see here, what is happening?
Professor, I may have to leave also.
Okay. Okay, yes, Dr. Kamaldeen. All right. So, the Charter for a Jazz Special Interest Group, I guess. Let's see here. So, our mission is to prioritize a holistic approach to the study and interpretation of jazz through the lens of culture and history, race and power. Presentations on the technical aspects of jazz construction and performance must consider the above. This approach is grounded in the scholarly tradition of Max Roach, Amiri Baraka, Archie Shepp, and Billy Taylor, who used interdisciplinary Black studies as an investigatory premise. In fact, many African-American jazz musicians, poets, and other Black artists innovated the field of Black studies in order to examine Black cultural productions. As architects of Black music studies, Max Roach wrote his well-known essay, Jazz is a Four-Letter Word, echoing the sentiments of Brother Steve Coleman and others. Amir Baraka, or his sentiments echoing his, perhaps. Amir Baraka authored Blues People, and Archie Shepp developed courses like Revolutionary Concepts in Black Music. This is groundbreaking work that examined the music as Black culture and considered jazz as an African-American epistemological source. This Jazz Special Interest Group stands on this intellectual and creative tradition set forth by these foundational scholars in order to allow for new perspectives and alternative narratives on jazz as an African-American art form and conversation within its broader diasporic connections. And I'll just read the purpose here. The purpose of the Jazz Special Interest Group is to transform the narrative of the origins, development, politics, distribution, performance, scholarship, and globalization of this African-American art form. This group will bring a new anti-racist, decolonial lens to conversations concerning the cultural context of the music. Further, a generative conversation for jazz music appreciation and center jazz music and its African-American origins in conversation with the diaspora, I should add. Our focus is to contribute to scholarship that centers the African-American architects of the music by drawing on the rich legacy of their testimonies, oral traditions, and autobiographies, as well as the processes and practice of jazz culture bearers Our purpose is to center jazz discourse within the ethnomusicological field and the lived experience of the practitioners of the music by honoring the primary source as the final word. We aspire to bring the legacy of jazz music to cultural heirs through a radical reimagining of jazz heritage. Our approach is revolutionary, decolonized interpretation of scholarship on this African-American art form known as jazz. And so I'll just breeze through some of our goals to facilitate the research, study, and performance of this music that has so largely defined the soundscape of the Black Atlantic world. Okay. Of the Black Atlantic world, and that has facilitated a transnational exchange amongst groups in the African diaspora and the African continent. Another goal is to sponsor and promote discussions, events, publications, and panels at the Society for Ethnomusicology on jazz, with a special focus on jazz and the transnational Black world, Black identities, Black communities, and anthropological ethnomusical approaches to the study of jazz music cultures. We will also organize vibrant and engaging jazz performances at SCM meetings and other places that connect with the local communities where conferences are held. And then finally, another goal is to promote Afro-descendant musicians who have been minoritized and marginalized in the jazz industry to participate in the education and performance of jazz and in jazz education at the primary, secondary, and collegiate level through institutional partnerships, productions, recordings, publications, and by other means. All who are members of the Society for Ethnomusicology are welcome, and all who are members of the community are welcome to become members. And then, you know, this is just something we can. I won't read through all of this, but everyone will receive a copy. Just some mechanics here, and I do want to show you our website. That has information about the charters up there, about us, how to join, our founding members and their biographies, so forth and so on. So I thought we would just kind of open it to questions about the mission, thoughts about the mission from our guests or from those who are here today, and then we can move into thinking about some programming. Any thoughts or questions? Points of discussion. Okay, all right. Who was with us last year? Is anyone? Okay, hello. Okay, it's been a while. Okay, wonderful. Okay. So concerning the mission, Mr. Tolliver, Mr. Steve Coleman, any thoughts about the mission? Any points of encouragement, points of discussion that you thought about and would like to raise?
Well, I'll say that that's a large order that you just read, and very exciting. You know, I like large orders because it gets you going. You know, so you can count me in. You know?
Yes, sir. All right. Other thoughts? Steve, Dr. Travis, Brother Conklin.
Well, we've been musicians, you know, the musicians have been dealing with this for a long time. You know, I mean, this is not really new. Maybe it's not organized on the same level as what you're doing right now, but this whole narrative of talking about the music and sort of how can I say this? Not giving credit to the people who created the music. I mean, there's conversations with Coltrane and cats like that talking in the late 50s and 60s about the same issue, you know. So it's not new. I know that when I talked to Max, he seemed to be quite I won't say bitter, but they felt like a lot of credit was taken away from them and given to others in terms of this music, whereas that was not done with other music and other cultures, you know, I guess is what I would say. So musicians were long aware of this, and people have boycotted festivals, and you know, things like that, the stuff that Max and Mingus and people like that did before, you know, the things that Charles were involved in with the was it Strata East or what was it? Yeah,
Ready?
yeah. I mean, you know, people. So musicians have been long aware of this thing about ownership of the some of the things you mentioned, ownership of the music, distribution of the music, or even just credit. You know, for the creators of the music and the people who've been pushing it. I've had conversations with Julian Priester, all kinds of people, you know, about this very same issue. You know, but like I said, it rarely gets to be on an organized level. You have people who started companies and things like this, but a lot of things always seem to be sabotaged somewhere down the line. Um, so it's definitely needed. You know, it's a conversation that's definitely needed because I feel that there are still um, people who are creating this music who are not getting credit. You know, even now. You know, and it's definitely what's happening in the past. You know, I'm very curious about some of the things that you were involved in, Charles. You know, some of those moves. I've talked to, you know, cats like Doug Hammond and people like this, and they've told me, you know, certain stories and everything, but I've never actually talked to you
Right,
about, you
right.
know.
So you have to talk to the source, not to peripheral, if I might say, um, musicians.
Mm-hmm,
So uh, when I got started, it was it was only for the love of the music. As a toddler and a teenager, you know, eating and sleeping our heroes. And once I was accepted and was in, I guess I went on a three-prong attack. One where what you said about credit being given to musicians. So I realized that number one, if you were going to make strides at that time, which was the mid 60s on, uh, you needed the help of other musicians who appreciated your work and would pull you in. You know what I mean, Steve? Uh,
mm-hmm, yeah.
and if that didn't happen, you were going to have to find a way to do that if you were going to stay in this. And uh, Max Roach, we all were paying attention to basically three of our progenitors, Miles, Train, and Max Roach.
Mm-hmm,
And uh, I realized that that first prong of attack was going to be how to issue products so that you could get gigs. And I watched how Max was marginalized once he went into the activist mode full time.
right. Abby
And
talked to me a lot about that.
right,
Yeah.
and so luckily, when he formed the band that I became a part of in 1967, he had Stanley Cowell at the first rehearsal,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and we bonded from then till his recent passing. And the two of us together, we decided the first prong of attack would be to record ourselves as professionally as the big guys and shop it, not actually be entrepreneurs with it.
mm-hmm,
But we found that in shopping it, we were not going to get what we should have.
mm-hmm.
And so we took the bull by the horn and we created Strata East Records. Now, no one knew about that at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And not even the musicians that we recorded on the first LP. It was just that it was, you know, these two musicians. doing what is now considered a DIY.
Mm-hmm.
I never considered what I was doing as a DIY.
Mm-hmm.
It was like we sit down at the piano, we come up with a new tune, and we flesh it out, and to get whoever the musicians are, you're ready to get at it, so that you can present it on stage. And so um, that was what was the beginnings of Strata East. And Max Roach was an integral part of that because I consulted him on what he had attempted to do with the debut thing with him in Mangus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Have said in a few other interviews, they actually wanted Miles to be involved with that too, but there was no way that that they were going to get Miles, because he had already taken off with the Columbia, and so to get involved, Miles was not of the type that he was going to get involved with what he would have been actually considered a DIY at the time, and so but taking from the things that in my discussions with Max, we forged ahead. So with that first prong attack, and with that, that opened up the second prong attack, which is that for all of us, if you were discovered in those years, as it is now, and you got signed to whatever were the major independents or that would issue product on you, you were assured to get work. The agents would, pick up on that, and of course you would get work. And so the second prong of attack was to use what we were doing with the first recording or two to get those gigs that we were not getting prior to that, you know. And a lot of musicians in New York, because practically everyone was still living in New York at that time. No one had moved out to California.
Mm-hmm.
you know, the places. So uh, they started picking up on that little by little by little. And the main person, the main hero in the development of this African American entrepreneurship was Clifford Jordan, the great
Mm-hmm.
singer. Because in fact he had already done what we were doing. He had quietly done it. He already had about 4 or 5 recordings ready to go, and he came to us, and the rest became history because once those recordings started to be released, a lot of musicians who otherwise would not have gotten a chance to have their own recordings, at least not at that time, um, gravitated to us, and we got to about 60 or 70 over a 10-year period. And I'll just add this. I mean, it's been asked many times um, about Gil Scott Heron and Winter in America. Well, uh, Winter in America involved two wonderful artists, not only Gil Scott Heron, but Brian Jackson as well.
Mm-hmm.
And one day, both of them walked into our little cubby hole and said they'd been hearing about what we were doing and that they wanted to release something which they had produced themselves. And the rest is history on that one because, of course, we took them on and issued it. Uh, and it enabled us to prove the point that African American musicians could control this quote unquote jazz music um, uh, if they really wanted to, if they really wanted to. And when we were able to, start to satisfy the demands that were starting to happen, and I might add that, in that period, Steve and Melania and Travis and Maya and the audience, uh, all record operations were feeding off of mom and pop,
Right.
small distributors. And if you knew how to work that over the 10 markets of the United States, you could stay in the business. Now, we weren't the only ones that were doing this. I mean, Sam Cooke was doing that too,
Mm-hmm.
or Barry Gordy and Motown. And
Mm-hmm.
so uh, this is a big Hollywood story, and there's a lot of things that can come off of that with this wonderful endeavor that Professor Cunningham has placed before us with SIG, SIG, and that's just the start. And all of that, I'll just end with that. All also fed off of the Black African American entrepreneurship, because it just so happened at that same time, when we made the first recording in 1970 and started to issue in 1971, Black Enterprise magazine was formed with Mr. Gray,
Mm-hmm.
and we wound up on the cover of that magazine. Myself, Stanley, and Max, in a big article on this subject matter of how does the quote unquote jazz musician survive, in this business. And one might want to go back and get that cataloged edition, which was published in 1972. Yeah, that's it for now.
So, so let me ask you this: the older brothers like Gigi Grice and Lucky Thompson. I know you. I mean, you hip to what they were trying to do maybe a decade before you cats. In publishing and things like that. Did you tap into them also?
I tapped into Gigi Grice and the other brother as teenagers, sitting up all night long, eating and sleeping those records, trying to learn how to play those chord changes. And then it was to come to my knowledge that Gigi Grice was involved with getting control over the publishing of the
Right.
songs, and in fact had done that, and that for some reason he ran into problems with that. I don't know the particulars of it, but
He basically got blackballed.
yeah, and I don't understand that, because everyone should, if they have composed a song, they are owners of 100% of that as a composer. And
Right.
if they decided they wanted to have a publishing company, they are owners of 100% of the publishing too. And all you had to do was join BMI or ASCAP, and eventually, and I might add, most of the quote unquote jazz guys were with BMI. Yeah, I don't know why, but and if you saw that when you were young and started up, you went to BMI, and you could join for nothing then. Now it's a ton of money, and yeah, and at I think somewhere between 1964 and 1967, I was doing a lot of taking the band to Europe, because another thing, Clifford Jordan, God bless him. And not only was he a great saxophonist, but he was a mentor, because he had the book on all of the gigs in Europe,
Mm-hmm.
from going there with Mangus, and he gave me that. He gave me a copy of it, and I was able to utilize that, and getting a lot of work for the guys. But I would come back home, and I would go to BMI, and I said, wow, I haven't received any
Right.
royalties on my songs that were performed in this club, in that concert. And the guy who was handling it at the time, he had a desk that was full of paper, and he said, uh, what concerts? What's and in the bylaws, it's that you're supposed to get paid just like classical musicians every time you
Sure.
perform, and they had not even started to do that with the jazz guys.
Hmm.
So I was on the ground floor of getting that to happen because I codified everything and I brought it in and I stayed on it until finally this one guy who was handling, of course now it's computerized, but uh, then it was pen and paper, and I said, here is a year list of gigs where I played, and I had to fill out forms for the European societies. Go
Yeah.
go find it. And of course all societies, you know, they divvy up, you know, the funds to each other for all of the artists who have performed in their territories. And there was sitting a ton of money. And
Hmm.
for me, for my songs and my publish. And so from there, slowly, they didn't want to see anybody else come in there like me, I guess. you know, So, and this was when BMI was at their original location before they started being moved around Manhattan, as you remember, Steve. And so, um, uh, I thinking about G.G. Grice, I don't, I'm still a quandary as to why he was beat up on, you know,
Hmm.
for doing something it wasn't going to harm anybody except bring, funds to the musicians, composers, and publishers if they wanted to publish itself. I might lastly add that, of course, the catalog of Blue Note Records, yes, all of the great recordings, but what sat underneath Alfred's company was Blue Horizon Music and Groove Music, in which the guys basically gave him the publishing on the publishing
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
And of course, they were able to get funds from BMI big time later on. When everything started to get computerized, and the that fund that was issued to the Musicians Union for previous recordings. But it was the publishing which was sitting underneath Blue Note Records, which made it, king. You know, and realizing that was a big concern when you move into the record business because the mechanicals are become a big portion of how you run a record operation.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot more to that we could get into in other discussions. But again, this is about the African American black entrepreneurship, and it was feeding right off of Graves's new endeavor with um, Black Enterprise, which was just at the moment that Ida Lewis came with her magazine. You know,
Hmm.
uh, so yeah.
So, wow, since we started, this is a kind of a wonderful special guest situation. So I guess I have a question for you all. There are folks in the room who are publishing, have institutional relationships, who are teaching, have professorships, other things like that. And so what are some suggestions about what we can do to speak to or to engage with this perspective that you're offering in terms of privileging culture bearers and moving the music forward so that the people who are creating the music own the music, control the music, or other thoughts like that. And we'll let them answer if there are any questions in the room, then we can answer. Just very quickly, any thoughts?
So if I can throw one thing in here, and I'll try to condense it, based on what we've heard already, one of the things that seems to me really, really profound is that whatever else we do, we are in some ways involved in a particular kind of recovery project.
Yes.
And and that's a project where, I mean, Steve Coleman has been doing this for years, like interviewing elder musicians. He tells this great story about finding Jimmy Merritt, and but but just talking to people and finding out from them, you know, what was your experience in this music? How did you come of age? How have you learned about things? What have been your connections with other people? And so, on one hand, there's going to the people who are still around us, still available, and respecting them and honoring what they have to tell us. There's also, in a much more profound sense, and this is something that I think is very familiar to many of us in academia, this question of citational politics. And we don't necessarily need that phrase, but I remember when I was in college in the late 80s, I was really, I had my mind opened by reading the interviews in Arthur Taylor's Notes and Tones. And here we are now, some 35 years later, and I can still count on maybe one hand the number of serious bits of scholarship on this music that actually make reference to that book. And so if we imagine that, there's his book, there's Gigi Grice's Rat Race Blues. There are all these things that are already out there. And we simply need to go find them, incorporate them into what we do. Think about the work that the late Leonard Brown did, or, so many other different people, and even, modern day people. So, the book up here by Damani Phillips, what is this thing called Soul? A collection of interviews done a few years ago by Jeremy Pelt called Griot. So people are still doing this work. And a lot of what falls to us as people who are concerned with this music is to make sure that we are not only doing our new stuff, but bringing in and making space for all of the work that has already been done. We don't need to keep reinventing the wheel. It's already there, So acknowledge it and then use that as a foundation to build on. But it seems that, we keep doing the same things over and over again, but we're finding out, like, as Brother Tolliver put it, there were people doing what he did before. And that can be a guide to helping you do better stuff in the present and in the future, instead of just trying to invent it all over and over again.
Thank you, Dr. Travis. Any thoughts on that, Professor Charles, Professor Steve? Okay, let's open this up for questions. We have a few more minutes. Okay, yes, if you can okay, I did see this lady. Yeah, go for it. Okay, if you can introduce yourself and then speak really loudly.
All right, I'm Carla Becker. I teach at Delaware State University. Hello, thank you, everybody. So I'm Carla Becker. I teach at Delaware State University, and I teach multiple classes. But I have attended some of the HBCU initiatives online a couple of times. I do have a question though, is if there have been, and if there has not been, can we organize an action plan to propose HBCU college leadership? Our president is Tony Allen, and to develop strong jazz studies or improvisational creativity programs. So it has been organized to propose to college universities present.
I know that Dr. Clark was just talking about the HBCU jazz. Oh,
Right.
Okay.
But has there been an action plan to really propose to college leadership in terms of
is anyone, because I'm not sure, is there an answer, or we can also give that to him when he, but any answers from what has
or ideas on how to propose to college leadership?
Oh, Professor Charles, you were at the New School for years. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, it was very difficult to hear what her main question was because of the connection with my computer.
Is there an action plan or a idea on how to propose college leadership presidents to develop HBCU jazz programs?
Right. Yes, the HBCUs are, in my estimation, sorely lacking. I think that Meyer, you could speak to that because you have done extensive work on this question.
Well, I have a question, I mean, for especially those who are in senior administration in the room are like Dean Shanahan. How does a school, what's the process for a school approving of and funding something like a new major?
Okay, so I'm one of the founding members of this special interest group, and the reason why I joined this is, of course, I work closely with my.
Thank you, Dr. Shanahan. Okay, but then they'll be able to hear you.
All right. So the reason why I joined this, I agreed to be one of the founding members of this special interest group. Is because, of course, because of Maya and all the work that she's done. She's been a consistent voice in trying to sort of recenter how we think about jazz. But also this question, right? You know, I'm a dean at the University of Maryland, and her question is, how do we change the structure of curriculum? How do we create new majors and minors? And I'm sure that Travis can speak to this too. It's difficult, you know. Western academic structures are based on the Western canon. And jazz just happens to be in there, quote unquote jazz, just happens to be in there for the very reasons that our distinguished guests have said, right? This is music that has been sort of co-opted and has been moved away from its cultural roots. The difficulty, of course, is that to create new majors and minors, you need buy-in from faculty, from administrative structures. So, for example, at the University of Maryland, we would have to have a significant push from the faculty. We believe in shared governance. So, unfortunately, deans and provosts and presidents even cannot push this down to the departments. The departments, it has to be a grassroots effort, which is why I'm excited to see so many people come to this session, because we need buy-in across the board by faculty in the departments and students too. Students can advocate for the faculty to take it up. How can we change the way we teach jazz? How can we change the way we even search for positions in jazz? And we're searching for one right now at the University of Maryland, searching for a director of the jazz program. And I took a look at the first version of the position, and we sent it back because we want to see our departments, our schools of music, sort of re-angle, change the way they think about how they teach jazz. So I think we're on the way, but this SIG is really important because it requires a groundswell. I do also want to, since I'm at the mic, I want to introduce my sister, scholar friend, Dina Bennett, who is who I went to school with. We're both at Indiana University, the Ethnomusicology program, and her career has followed museums. And I think that the museum space is where we see this music really centered in and connected to the history in ways that we should be doing in academic spaces as well. So can I have her come up and introduce herself? Dina, I know, I'm putting her on the spot.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I haven't been in an SEM meeting in a long time, so I'm really glad to be here and glad to see that this particular group exists. Yes, I have been in museums, and I have been in 3 African-American music museums that have very much been tied to the community. The B.B. King Museum and Delta Interpretive Center in Indianola, Mississippi. The American Jazz Museum, where I am now in Kansas City in the historic 18th and Vine Jazz District. And then most recently before this, I was at, in Nashville, where I was curatorial director for the National Museum of African American Music that was just built. So, yes, I agree with what has been said and what, Dean Shonigan has said, that, the museum is the space where we actually have, relationships with the community out of which this music comes. And I'm very fortunate to be in this space. And if there's anything I can do, I hope to remain very active with this group. I would love to be called to service and helping to push these initiatives forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Maya, may I interject? Now that I've heard the three wonderful academic people ask this question in various forms, and I think Steve will probably concur on some of this. The major and minor aspect in academia or higher education for quote unquote how to do this with jazz. Well, of course, initially, my introduction to academia was through Reggie Workman at the New School. Now, he asked me to, because at that time, major and minor were not discussed. It was come in and teach a class, which was how the institutionalizing of teaching of jazz music started. And Donald Byrd was, as he did with a lot of institutions at that time, he would come in and help to formulate the curriculum. Uh, the curriculum at the New School, as it was going to be with all the other institutions, of course, had Western classical music there, because in order to have your accreditation, you had to teach it. You know, you had to have, and you had to have professors and people who had the degrees and could teach that. You know, theory, the whole nine yards, with getting a degree with at that time I was supposed would be a minor, considered a minor in jazz. It took years before the universities started to add the jazz as a program, and eventually some of them got to major and minor aspects. But after 27 years, which is the number of years I spent teaching and formulating performance classes, I decided that students who wanted to go for 4 years and get a degree in jazz, a BF, fine arts or whatever, they needed to be able to have on a major level the quote unquote now jazz language in terms of theory, composition, and performance. And I discovered that there was always a pushback against that because the heads of deans and chairs of that were overseeing the jazz department, you had to have a Western classical music, to justify your letters behind, and graduation. And Brother Travis, he was right on point, because we're dealing with recovery, and how to get the major and minor structures for this African American beautiful art form in the university systems in general, but at the HBCUs in particular.
Yes.
Because I just add this. My freshman year at Howard University was not as a music student. It was in the medical field in pharmacy. But as I've said in many interviews, all my time was spent in the fine arts building in a practice room. And my freshman classmate was Andrew White. And Andrew White was, till this day, one of the greatest saxophonists ever. And also, as far as I'm concerned, the greatest transcriber that ever lived.
Mm-hmm.
And and Andrew, at the age of 17, when we were freshmen there at Howard, he could have taught the people who were professors in the music department. And there was not a shred of jazz theory, harmony, composition being taught at Howard. You had to get a Western classical music degree. Okay. And so we sorely need that now, as the three ladies who came up and spoke to this. And how do we now recover this, which is, been missing, you know, in academia? Okay.
Thank you, Professor Tolliver. And we do have to leave this room. My quick thoughts are, is it as simple as a proposal and faculty available to teach and facilitate the major? And then the commitment to the funding. I mean, that could happen in a quick meeting, not a quick one, but a meeting with presidents of the HBCU. All right, Brother Crocker, last quick question, and then we're going to end, because I think people need to get into this room, and then we're gonna and then we have some information to give you very quickly.
A quick question, my elders. Bob Steve Coleman, blessings. Blessings. So my question is like two-tiered, and I'm honored that I get to be able to ask it to the practitioners of this music that have like the experience, or as much as I'm old, kind of thing. And the question that I have, one, in terms of developing curricula, that I find that I find that the initial uses of this music, I'm talking about Black music right now. So like the initial uses of this music, for instance, as we see, like as it is used in Africa with the drum, was a process whereby like the music was used to deal with connecting, for instance, with the ancestors, or bringing community together and having that experience, and I find that aspect of the music is missing, in terms of the curricula. And I mean, we see Train, in terms of like the later Train, digging more into his spiritual side, which is initially how the music was used. So the question that I have, half of it is, why is it that we're not seeing this in the classroom? Two, another question that I have is that with this music, the culture of being able to learn from the masters right on stage, and the idea of mentorship is something that we see prior to even the jazz music. I don't like using the term, I'll substitute it for creative music. So all of like the development of creative music had to do with like getting mentorship from a master. And right now I find that like that aspect of the music is missing, whereby like all I need to do to get the degree, or to pay my dues is, just to do like the homework and stuff. But now the experience of the music, the lifestyle of the master, the lessons that the master have learned from his own life experience that, Bert said, if you don't have that life experience, it won't come out of your horn. That aspect of mentorship and highest level of kinship and the relationship between student and master, I feel like it's not cultivated at this point. And I would like to know what could be causing that, and how do we get back to that, so that like the music going forward can still have that depth of substance that comes from mentorship.
Cloud, what we're gonna do, and because your question is fundamental and does speak to even the question of the music being institutionalized and having to go to institutions to learn it. But what we're gonna do is we have your question recorded. And the reason why I'm having to end this is another group does need to get into the room. And we'll talk with Professor Charles, Professor Steve, the other, Dr. Travis, other panelists. Thank you for all for being here. To continue this, maybe on Zoom. If we don't have your information, please do sign up, and even if you're not ready to come, that'll be to capture your information at semjazz.org. And we can talk in the hall. I want to thank you, Brother Plankla, for taking time and for your wonderful question, your presence. Dr. Travis, Steve Coleman, thank you for everything, for your support and your thoughts. And of course, Professor Jazz Master Charles Tolliver, thank you.